Hey, everybody. I'm Tom Cottingham, CEO of Flyover Future. Thanks for joining us in another one of our conversations with founders in the Louisville region who are finalists in the Vogt Awards. And today we welcome Dan Ross-Li, the founder of Affinna. And Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks
And
for having
nice
me.
to have you. So tell me and the audience a little bit about the Vogt Awards and the process that you've gone through, because I know there's a lot of competition.
Yeah, so the Vogt Awards, it's a great program based here in Louisville. There's some requirements to it. I won't, but you can look them up. But I think you basically have to be in Louisville, and they give you $25,000 non-dilutive, which is to any founder that's like music to your ears.
Right.
But more importantly, they also have a 10-week accelerator program, and we just finished week 2 of 10. It's every Thursday. And then, of course, the publicity and the networking and all the soft, besides the hard cash, all the soft networking you get is super valuable. And amongst us three of trying to get startups, especially tech-enabled startups, off the ground in Louisville, it's a great program. There's 6 winners every year, and so it's a real home run for any founders out there because you get money with no equity to give away. You
Right.
get a great network opportunity. So if you need early supporters, more investors, or advisors or contacts, it's a great network. And then third and most importantly, is the accelerator program to help you get your startup off the ground. I would say I don't want to qualify everything's great, but I think the first thing you gravitate is the non-dilutive equity, because
Right.
for any tech-enabled startup, you're like, oh, that is awesome, and it's
Right.
definitely worth it. Yep.
Right. Yeah, it's a great program, and it's been around, I think, 23 years.
Yeah.
Which is pretty incredible. So tell us a little bit about your company, Affinna, and you are a digital ticket office, mobile first, I think.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit more about what that means and what your USP is.
Yeah. So we're Affina. We do tickets, we do live event tickets, and our goal is to just really streamline that POS experience, the point of sales experience for any live event. We always alluded to, like, we want to be the Toast tab of tickets. All right, you shouldn't know we exist, and it should be a super clean process for you as the event host. And I think one experience it's been over a year, but the Taylor Swift is still making headlines, right? Of what a
Crazy.
poor purchase experience that is for a ticket.
Right.
And people don't realize that ticketing is actually just like any POS system. It's just, that's not the event, right? The event, the show, that's the actual asset, the good.
Right.
Purchasing the ticket for some reason is making as many headlines as the actual event. And we see that as a major problem. Now, of course, like today, we can't start ticketing Taylor Swift. So our go-to-market strategy is more focused on medium-sized GA events. Basically, if you're a small to medium-sized business, if you have tickets, you collect sales tax, and you have a ticket office, and you're looking to drive revenue through, like, you're our customer, and we'd love to talk to you. But more importantly, we're delivering a product that is strictly focused on ticketing, your POS system, to give you the money that you sell from your tickets and enable greater revenue, more streamlined reporting, and a seamless admission process.
Interesting. And you're like any kind of POS system where you have to be worried about the end user experience, and that's super important. But the end user isn't really your customer, right?
Correct.
Your customer is the venue owner.
Correct. Yes. So that's our customer, and I think that was a big realization we have compared to most other ticketing platforms. I think a lot of people get into ticketing because they come at it from the fan perspective, right? And they think, hey, how do I make the fan better experience? But at the end of the day, the fan does have a huge say in the buying decision, right? But they make it through the host, right? And the host is the one who has to decide, like, hey, how do I make that trade-off between paying a premium for a better customer experience versus my bottom line? And we try to deliver both a great customer experience at a very affordable price.
That makes sense. But the ticketing industry, as we think about it, is really dominated by just a couple of ginormous players.
Right.
How do you intend to make inroads into that market? I mean, obviously, like you said, you're not going to be getting Taylor Swift, but there are thousands of events every day in America, right?
Yeah, there's thousands of events every day. It's just an integral part of the human experience, right? When you think about like a restaurant, restaurants, hotels, flights, and then going to shows. Like, why are you going to get the hotel room, going to the getting a flight to somewhere. It's to probably experience something. And so our unique value proposition is, hey, we focus strictly on the ticket, right? We go to events and we say, there's already best in class solutions for email marketing, for CRMs. Like, we don't need to be a comprehensive event management solution. We just need to be a comprehensive ticketing solution. And that's the reason we chose digital ticket office, not event management.
Right.
We just focus strictly on the ticket, strictly on how do you drive more revenue through ticketing. And then more importantly, from my background is this data enablement, data capture and data enablement. And that's really where we're going to see a lot of value add for our customers, is just the knowledge that, like, as with most transactional systems, one is you have to be able to do it, right? So a lot of companies don't even do that well, right? Like,
Right.
you have to be able to host a website that can, at the end of the day, process the
Handle the
purchase.
traffic. Right.
Right. So we can easily say, like, our first value proposition is we can do it. We can handle 10,000 people coming to your site or coming to our site and selling 10,000 or whatever volume you need, right? We can just do, I call them table stakes. And when your competition can't do that well, it's like, all right, like that's a pretty low bar. But more like the second and the third hurdle, and you see these parallels in other industries, is since everything is digital now, you have this huge avenue to capture data, right? And
Right.
then beyond that, beyond just being a large repository of data, how do we enrich the data to drive your business metrics? And that's really my background as a trader, was, taking data in and then processing that information into driving better pricing decisions, more revenue. And so that three-tiered approach of, like, we can do the table stakes, right? You should be able to buy a ticket. When you hit checkout, that should be a 99.9% process, not a 60% process, right?
Right. Right.
And then capture the data so you can make better informed decisions. And then the last piece is kind of filtering that data, processing, enriching it, so that way we can deliver, pricing suggestions to you as a turnkey solution, rather than, expect you to be able to be the data scientist behind the scenes, being able to make those really analytical decisions. We just deliver them to you straight through as a recommendation.
Right. Because the challenge, as I understand it, is there's so many intermediaries between the venue owner operator and the ultimate ticket holder that there's a dearth of data, right?
Yes.
They don't really know. If the scalper buys 30 tickets, they don't know who that scalper is selling them to and who those people might be selling and we're giving them to. And
Right.
so what you're trying to do is get rid of all of that layer, or those layers, and then allow the venue operator to have direct access to who is buying their tickets and the data around that.
Correct.
That,
yeah.
I mean, there will still be people that buy mass quantities of tickets to scalp, but ultimately you're trying to close that gap.
Right. And I think we talk about, you look at the revolutions over in retail with the direct to consumer movement, right? And being able to eliminate wholesalers, distributors. We're trying to do the same thing analogous in ticketing, is saying, these functions, whether willingly or unwillingly, were necessary when the paradigm was physical tickets, right? And physical goods, and you needed that network effect. But we can really just take the same playbook as the digital revolution in retail and say, hey, we can be a D2C enablement tool for you, the host, right? We build that infrastructure for you to deploy directly to your consumer or to your fan. And then the value is, one is you eliminate all the middlemen from a revenue perspective, right? But the other aspect is that the data capture element, right? Which are the two parallels. So we look to execute kind of the same playbook in that's revolutionized the retail space, right? And bring that back into the ticketing space. And our goal is, again, not to, launch our own brand in that sense, but really just to be more of a Shopify, an enablement tool for you to carry your business into a digital first delivery system.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you'll almost be white labeling it, right?
Yes, correct.
Right. Which makes a ton of sense. Does anybody have data on what is the delta between the retail price of a ticket and the ultimate price that it's sold to by the person that actually attends the event? I mean, I wonder how much revenue is left there.
It is.
Right?
It is absolutely astounding, and there's a huge. So, I used to work for StubHub. The resale industry itself is $10 billion, right? So that is resale ticketing, and that's only resale ticketing on centralized exchanges, right? Like the StubHub, the Ticketmaster, the SeatGeek. There's estimated that 50% transacts off platform on Craigslist, on Facebook
Sure, right.
Marketplace,
Just
right?
Tom going down and buying 20 tickets and selling
Yeah.
them
And
online,
and,
right?
and Tom says, like, I don't want to pay a 40% transaction fee on StubHub. I'm just gonna put in the elbow grease and do Facebook Marketplace, and then just meet me at the coffee shop down the street or something, or I'll mail them to you,
Right.
And that's expected to be about 50%. So it's probably a $20 billion.
20 billion. Wow.
Yeah, it's and that's secondary marketplace, right? That is, none of that goes back to the host.
No.
And in terms of the
Or the artist.
Or the artist, yeah. There's a lot of values lost, or not lost, but not going back to the originators of the good.
Right.
And there's a huge 80-20 principle between who is losing out, right? So, when I was at StubHub, the data just shows like you can have, you can be, I would say, like a team, like a professional sports team, or even a musician, right? You're going to have areas with higher disposable incomes, right? If you go to New York, LA, if you're touring there, like the disposable income there is much higher than in, Flyover America, right?
Right.
And then because you're doing a tour, you're going to have to make all these different stops. So even with like a mid-sized artist, like you don't know how to price the Bay Area on a Saturday night, right? But then but you might have tickets going at a 5, 6, it's not unusual, a 10x multiple in those areas because the secondary market's so prolific, right?
Right.
And disposable income is so high. And then you take a tour stop in, Louisville, Kentucky, right? And you're still probably going to sell out, right? But the amount of transactions on the secondary would probably be much less.
So you could ultimately price tickets kind of like airlines price seats.
Exactly. And I think
which is interesting. Yeah.
Yes, it is. I think the big change that enables this feature for hosts is that's the world we live in now, right? Like a lot of artists are very concerned about, the optics of what would be termed dynamic pricing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the reality is sinking in that if you don't do it, somebody else would, right? Like people,
right,
the market
that you have no control over, right?
Right.
And they're going to be charging $1,000 for your tickets instead of $600 or whatever, right?
Right. Or yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a ginormous opportunity. So you're building a tech platform essentially, and tech talent has got to be an important part of your overall staffing. How's that been in Louisville? One of the things, we're Flyover Future, and talent is a huge issue in flyover country. It's actually a huge issue everywhere. So tell me a little bit about how you've been able to acquire talent and how that's gone in a city like Louisville and in that region, Southern Indiana.
Yeah. So there's a couple of theses we operated on, but the overall message is like there is talent here, right? I would say there's a 3-step problem to how do you solve the talent issue, right? And our thesis is, one is like you don't need that many engineers, right? You just need a handful of really, really great
really
engineers.
Good ones, yeah.
Right. So it's a quality problem, not a quantity problem. The second thesis is that big areas like the Bay Area where I talk about, like, you're hiring talent from the world, right? You could easily have 200 engineers from 80 different countries like that,
right?
And so it's unique to the Bay Area and maybe New York, right, where you can get an international, like the competition is international, right? I would say places like Austin or Colorado or Chicago, like the competition is national, right, or regional, right?
Right.
People, you're not going to go from, you're not going from Shanghai to Austin. You're going to Shanghai to San Francisco, and that's kind of, so it's not. And the places like Louisville is usually areas where you get a lot of brain drain, right? Like, but the thesis is, you just need to stop the brain drain, right? Like, there's quality talent here, and I joke with everybody too that, like, I used to live in Norfolk, Virginia, right? I met more software engineers from Norfolk, Virginia in San Francisco than I did in Norfolk, Virginia, right? So, like,
no, we export. Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things about flyover countries, I mean, you've attended University of Chicago. We have great universities, not necessarily the density, but world class. I think they're 18 make the top 100 world-class universities in flyover country. But we export that talent to San Francisco, to New York, to Austin. And while it may be difficult to move somebody from San Francisco to Louisville, it's not nearly as difficult to move somebody from Indianapolis to Louisville, right? So that regional attraction and retention becomes super important. So where are you finding talent?
So we source directly locally from the University of Louisville, right? Our thesis is, one, we can train people so long as they have the right mindset, the right ability. And technology is just constantly changing. So like every 4 years, it's something different. So you're really just looking for somebody who has the ability to learn very quickly, the aptitude, rather than that comes with a stock of knowledge. I mean, ChatGPT came out for us like 6 months ago, and to me that was like revolutionary. It's like now I need to be able to ask questions better, right, and be inquisitive rather than knowledgeable, if that makes sense.
Right.
So we source locally. We have a great pipeline of individuals coming through, and I think as part of the 1-2 punch, it's like we're trying to build a unicorn tech-enabled startup, but more importantly, like we want that to focus on economic development. And I always say, like, the biggest success of our startup isn't what we exit at. It's, will we have the next 100 great, tech engineers, tech founders come through our company?
Yeah, and spreading that DNA is really rewarding, I think, and you'll also probably spawn some startups as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's great. I think it's really important what you're saying, and we talk a lot about the talent stack. We used to talk about a tech stack, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is if you come out of university with a degree in computer science, you got to immediately start adding to your tech stack, and it could be something very specific, like what does your employer want you to learn? But but it's very rarely your current domain expertise, because that's going to change so fast. And you look at ChatGPT. I mean, I know people well who have been in software companies that have been developing AI solutions for the last several years, right? And all of a sudden, there's 10 startups using ChatGPT for doing exactly what they were trying to build.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
So I think the idea that you can train people if they have the aptitude and you're willing to put in the time to really train them is a great model. And keep them in the region is a great model as well. Finally, I guess, we can talk about what you would do with 25 grand, but the bigger question, I guess, is what are your big challenges? And like all entrepreneurs, we're always raising capital, but assuming you had more capital, where would you deploy it? What are you focused on for the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I think the big thing you learn about being in flyover country as a founder is you got to be really lean and you got to focus on revenue, right?
Right.
And so our focus is, I got that hammered to me, and we have a wonderful slate of angel investors and venture investors as well. But I think it was fortunate that we got him, but the message is clear. It's just like, you need to get revenue, right? And we can't live in the fantasy world. If you're in flyover country, you can't live in the fantasy world of you just walk down Sand Hill and somebody will write you, one of the 100 people will write you $1 million check.
Right. We'll go get fancy office space and latte machines and all that.
Exactly.
We don't do that here.
Yeah, you got to be lean, and you got to go after revenue, right? And it gives you a ton of clarity on the objectives of a business. Like there's no dancing around the fact that revenue is king. Revenue has always been king. I think there's a blip in the last, during the COVID bubble of the idea was king or the founder was king, right? Or and now
the pendulum. I've been in this business forever, and this is the pendulum that swings a whole lot. You're right. You get into the matrix where all of a sudden it's not about revenue; it's about an idea. I mean, WeWork is a classic example of that, right?
Right. Yeah.
You looked when WeWork was roaring. I realized there were like 2 or 3 companies in Europe that had been doing what they were doing for decades. Yeah. And so you look at what their stock price was, and it was, a reasonable multiple and stuff. And you're like, the rest is all hype. And now it's, I think, $400 million. So yeah, in flyover country, we don't care about the hype. It's what have you done? What'd you do today?
Yeah.
And I got sawhorses and some boards we could make desks out of. Right? Like, don't go
Yeah,
buy Aeron chairs or buy them on
exactly.
eBay. So you're lean and mean, but you've still got money that you need to raise and things you need to do. What's your focus is going to be what now on talking to customers?
Talking to customer, I like to make the distinction. Our goal is to get revenue, right? Be revenue positive, be a profitable company. We're super lean. We hire local. One other advantage per previous is it's relatively cheaper, right? People are cheaper. They're more motivated relative to the coast. And the goal is like right now we have, I would call users, right? They use a product, they create events. They're non-revenue events, if that makes sense, where they're doing it as
there's tons of those, right?
Yeah, side business, and it's been great for us to get reps through the products. Our focus now is trying to pivot over to the revenue aspect of like, are you ticketing for revenue as their primary means of business, right? And how do we be your ticketing provider on that front? And that should flow into our business model and our revenue and drive revenue to us as a business. But the whole focus is like, how do we go from, the Paul Graham of just incessantly like being, have you launched? Have you launched? Like we've launched, like we're in, the product is live, it's wild. How do we keep pushing? And our goal from now is, we talk about how do we get to Taylor Swift? There is 50 steps, right? And I think what's more important is like, how do we get from 50 to 200? Like, how do we really fine grain articulate? How do we go from here where we are today to there tomorrow? And the goal tomorrow and the focus for the next 12 months is like, how do we get revenue? How do we satisfy that condition? And we're going to break that up even smaller to like, my first objective is like, how do we get a consistent recurring stream of paid tickets, right? And that's kind of the 1A approach is like, you might be a business that hosts brewery tastings, things like that, where it's not our primary business of ticketing events, but we do 100 tickets once a week kind of thing. And for us, like, that's good revenue, right? Like that's good revenue.
It's real money, and it's also a way to get the product out there and in people's hands. And no, I totally get it. And I think it's going to be an interesting pivot for you personally, going out and talking to clients. It's hard when you've created a product, but it's the most valuable thing you can do. Well, I think it's really exciting that you come to Louisville. I know a little bit about your story, and you moved here because you've got a wife who actually has a job that pays money, as opposed to being a founder, working for free. But you came to Louisville and decided that you could build it here, and you're doing that, and now you're a finalist for the Vogt Awards, and it's a great story, and I look forward to following you in the future and tracking your success. I love the way you break down things into actionable, doable items, and I think your approach is a really smart, well thought out approach. So I wish you great luck. Hey, thanks a lot. It's a Saturday. Your toddler did not appear, so kudos to him. And
well, Tom, I appreciate it. I just go back to like some people, I drive some people nuts by my hyper logical, take it and break it down. But I appreciate the compliment. It's refreshing to hear too. So and thank you. Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it earlier, but it's so hard to separate the urgent from the important, right? We're always focused on who's ever making the most noise. And sometimes you just need to break things down and say, no, actually, this is not on the list. We're not going to worry about that fire right now. Let it burn. And, everybody rushes to whatever the fire is. And you need a leader who can be really clear and break things down into understandable steps and goals. And it seems like you do that, and that keeps people pretty focused, because it's so easy to lose focus in a startup. Believe me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I feel it. I'm fighting that every day.
No, it's a constant battle. Hey, thanks a lot. Great talking to you, and good luck again.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the time, and it's great.
Right on, man.